Welcome to CNN 10 on this 10-10-2018. I hope your day's a 10 out of 10 so far. I'm Carl Azuz at the CNN Center. Our first story is on the resignation of a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Nikki Haley has held that position since January of 2017. She'd been nominated by President Donald Trump shortly after he was elected. On Tuesday, Ambassador Haley announced she'd leave the post by the end of this year. Several reports said the news came as a surprise to some members of the Trump administration. Whoever works as ambassador represents America's interest to the United Nations. And there's a lot going on right now between the U.S. and other UN members like Iran, North Korea, and Russia. Also, with the U.S. midterm elections 4 weeks away, some politicians are questioning the timing of the ambassador's announcement. At a news conference yesterday with President Trump, Ambassador Haley reflected on her work at the UN and her tenure as governor of South Carolina for the 6 years before that. She said there'd been a lot to manage.
It's been 8 years of intense time, and I'm a believer in term limits. I think you have to be selfless enough to know when you step aside and allow someone else to do the job. So thank you, Mr. President. It's been an honor of a lifetime.
President Trump said Ambassador Haley had done a fantastic job and had helped solve a lot of problems on the world stage. And UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he deeply appreciated Haley's cooperation, support, and productive working relationship. She plans to stay on the job until the end of this year. Meantime, President Trump is working on finding a successor to Ambassador Haley and says he'll make a nomination in 2 or 3 weeks. 10-second trivia. What is the name of the last hurricane that made landfall in the U.S. state of Florida? Nate, Irma, Matthew, or Irene? The last hurricane to strike Florida was Irma. It made landfall on September 10th, 2017. More than a year later, another powerful storm is approaching the Sunshine State.
Hurricane Michael is forecast to be the most destructive storm to hit the Florida Panhandle in decades. This storm will be life-threatening and extremely dangerous. We're expecting 4 to 8 inches of rain, and some areas might see 12 inches of rain. The storm will bring torrential rain to most of the Panhandle and Big Bend, which means flooding will be a major issue.
With landfall expected Wednesday, President Trump issued an emergency declaration for Florida. It gives FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the authority to do whatever it needs to do to save lives, protect property, and help those affected by the hurricane. In the Gulf of Mexico last night, Hurricane Michael was a Category 3 storm with maximum sustained winds of 120 miles per hour. Forecasters had warned it would strengthen. We don't know yet how strong it'll be at landfall. But hurricane warnings stretched across more than 300 miles of U.S. coastline, covering Florida's panhandle from the Alabama border to the Suwannee River. Even before Michael was this strong, it was deadly. Flooding related to the system killed at least 13 people in Honduras, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. Hurricane Michael struck Cuba on its way to the Gulf, and in addition to potential flooding in Florida, forecasters say that's also possible in Alabama, southern Georgia, the Carolinas, even Virginia. Damaging winds are a threat. Forecasters say the storm could spawn tornadoes as it moves inland. And one major concern for coastal areas, the storm surge.
A storm surge is not typically one big wave, but rather a bulge of water, a series of waves being pushed toward the shore by the winds. And as they ride up onto the land, they can do tremendous damage. Look at what a storm surge of 2 or 3 feet would look like on a house like this. That's more than enough to damage cars, to really hurt the house. But when you talk about 9 feet or more, as we are in some places here, then you have enough water to erode the foundation, to batter the top of the house, and homes are really not meant to withstand such things. Bear in mind, a cube of water, just 4 feet on all sides, a cube this size weighs as much as an automobile. That's a tremendous amount of potential damage coming ashore.
Up next, diet and exercise, or at least exercise. We all need it, we don't all get it. There are guidelines for how much we should exercise. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services says if we're doing moderate aerobic exercise, so think walking, swimming, or dancing, we should do at least 2.5 hours of it per week. If we're doing vigorous exercise like jogging, swimming laps, or mountain biking, we'll need at least an hour and 15 minutes a week. And that should all be spread out across the week. The government also recommends strength training at least twice a week and working all major muscle groups when we do. And CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta agrees that working out like this can help us live to 100.
I think the health benefits of exercise are too numerous to probably even say in a little session like this. You know it can reduce your risk of certain diseases. You know it can improve your muscle mass. Problem is, fewer than a quarter of Americans are actually getting the amount of exercise they should get. A lot of people have started turning to more extreme exercise or high-intensity interval training. This is when you exercise really intensely for a period of time, usually just under a minute, take a little break, do it again, and you do that cycle over and over again for 30 to 45 minutes. The big argument for high-intensity interval training is that not only might it help your metabolic profile overall, help you lose weight, help you build endurance for your heart and your lungs, but it might do it better than if you're doing the regular low interval training. But here's a rule of thumb that you should remember. Your maximum heart rate is typically 220 minus your age. So for me, that's right around 170. You don't want to let the exercise that you do really get over that range. First of all, it's potentially dangerous. Second of all, you're probably not getting the benefits of exercise as much as you otherwise would. So whether it's vigorous exercise or moderate exercise, just make sure you get some exercise in. Break a sweat, it'll probably help you live to 100.
For 10 out of 10 on this 10-10, yeah, I like saying that, we're taking you to a place with 400 bridges, 3,000 buildings, and 50,000 streets. If that sounds like a decent-sized community, it's not. At least not by human standards. Then again, it's not built to scale, not to our scale anyway. It's believed to be one of the world's largest model railroad sets. We're blowing the whistle and calling all aboard for a great big story.
Ralph Waldo Emerson once quoted that nothing great can ever be achieved without enthusiasm. I have a lot of enthusiasm. This is Northlands in Flemington, New Jersey. Northlands is the world's largest model railroad. Well, I guess, everybody has a passion for something. My thing was trains. I had trains around the Christmas tree as a kid. Wherever I lived, I'm planning track plans, and then over 18 years, I added 5 basements onto the house. And from that, I got fairly good at making mountains and bridges and design work, and we decided to give it to the world. So we tore it all down, bought this land, built Northlands. Any given day, we run between 85 and 90 trains. Some of the details in Northlands inside, about 40,000 feet of track, about 4,000 buildings, over 400 bridges. Many of the mountains in here are 3.5 stories high. Most things in here are scratch built. Underneath the entire superstructure, there's enough lumber to build about 42 large houses. It takes a few hours to go through for the average person to see everything. We went millions into debt to build this place. Everybody thought we were nuts. And the only one that believed that what I wanted to do was my wife, and she was totally with me on this, big time. It's an artistic endeavor. It's a gift to the world of what I can do, and it makes a lot of people happy.
Know what it takes to build something like that? A lot of training. You got to steam ahead, chug along, and train your eyes on the prize to keep the project on track and not go off the rails. It takes some serious locomotivation, thinking outside the boxcar, and knowing that at the end of the line, diesel make people commute or cross country to track such a model community. I'm Carl Azuz for CNN 10.